What's up guys, Keenan from Keenan KTV here and welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to go over what if Israel Adesanya goes in there and beats Anderson The Spider Silva. Where would that take him and who would we be fighting next? So with that being said, let's jump right into the video. In case you guys have missed my other Israel Adesanya vs Anderson videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you guys do not miss out on another upload on whatever fight it may be. If you guys did miss out, you guys can go back to the channel and view those. I made videos where I went over extensively how Israel Adesanya would defeat Anderson Silva, and I went over the only way I can see Israel Adesanya lose to Anderson in another video. So if you guys want to see more content on the fight, go back and do so. But for now, let's take a closer look at the Israel Adesanya vs Anderson Silva fight. At this point, I don't believe it's a secret that I expect Anderson Silva to lose against Israel Adesanya. However, the fight is being billed as Anderson Silva going in there against his clone, and that is the farthest thing of the reality. Maybe 10 years ago, this would have been a clone versus clone fight. However, 10 years have passed and a lot of things have changed for Anderson Silva. 10 years ago, he was 33, 34 years old. Today, the man is 43, 44 years old. And a 10-year gap is not a short window for a fighter. Most fighters do not even have a 10-year career. So for Anderson to go in there, add on top another 10 years, fight at the age of 43, this is not the Anderson that we all know. This Anderson is a shell of his former self. This Anderson is slower, physically weaker, with his timing being very much so off, and less able to take punishment as he used to back in the day. So for him to go in there and for us to really expect the Anderson of old to show up, it is not a very realistic expectation for us to have. He's going in there against somebody who even in his prime would put up a very hard fight against him, arguably even beat him. Adesanya is a decorated kickboxer. With the height and reach that he has over Anderson, I expect Anderson to not even find his range in this fight. Something that Anderson Silva rarely has to deal with. Most of Anderson's opponents were coming at him, walking into his range. That allowed Anderson to do the things that he has always done, counterpunch. But against a taller fighter, he is the fighter that needs to come forward. He is the fighter that needs to close the distance, and rarely have we ever seen Anderson do that. When is the last time we can go back and say that Anderson Silva was the aggressor in a fight non-stop? When is the last time that we could have said that Anderson Silva was the guy that always had to come forward to get off his shots? I can't think of any. For example, against Demian Maia, a lot of people said that that fight was very boring. Now why was it boring? We have to understand that the style that Anderson has is very much so counterpunch based. If Demian Maia in that fight didn't come forward and made Anderson Silva look like that, can you only imagine what a taller fighter with a lot more skill than Demian Maia would do to Anderson? To me, it does not scream an easy night for Anderson at all. Even looking at their mutual opponent in Derek Brunson, it was very clear who the fighter with the better performance was. Israel Adesanya was able to stop Derek Brunson in 1 round, whereas Anderson Silva had to take 3 rounds to win a controversial decision. And some may argue that MMA math is not going to work in this situation, and you may be right. The same case can be made for Israel Adesanya. Israel has never fought somebody like Anderson, so we don't know how Israel Adesanya is going to look against Anderson. But if there is ever a time for Israel Adesanya to defeat Anderson, it is most certainly right now that Anderson is a lot older. And in my personal opinion, Israel Adesanya will dominate Anderson from round to round. Personally, I don't expect this fight to make it out of the first round. I expect Israel Adesanya to hit him clean, and that will be enough to shake up Anderson and wobble him. Now, older fighters tend to get hurt a lot quicker. That is just the nature of the human body. The older you get, the weaker you get. So for Israel to go in there, not only do I expect him to knock him out, but it will be a total domination. The point that I made where I went over how Israel Adesanya is going to be the fighter that is going to make Anderson come at him will be in the end asking something of Anderson that he hasn't really done much in his career. And add on top asking something at the age of 43 years old. The quote of "you can't teach old dogs new tricks" will be definitely in effect. It will come down to the fact that we are asking something of Anderson to do differently than he has previously in his entire career. And asking a fighter who is 43 years old to do something differently than something that he has done in his entire career is not going to be very effective. So before Israel Adesanya knocks out Anderson, Anderson won't even look like Anderson to begin with. So by the time the fight is over and done with, I hope all of the fans will urge Anderson Silva to enter his retirement and stop fighting. At this point, it has come to a point where it is only going to do his legacy harm. You can compare this to Roy Jones Jr. in boxing, where in Roy Jones' prime, he was a very tremendous fighter who had accomplished a lot of things. But as time went on, his performances diminished fight by fight and he was just a shell of his former self. And add on top that he fought for probably 10 more years and added a lot more losses to his record, he really tarnished and put himself out of the greatest of all time conversations. What would a win over Anderson Silva mean for Israel Adesanya?
I lost myself inside of you, only to realize that I'd fall too.
Now for one, Anderson Silva is not even ranked, or he's number 15. He just came off of a suspension, so I don't really know where he is in terms of rankings. So a win over the number 15th ranked or not even ranked fighter shouldn't really mean a title shot right away. In my mind, I would say a fight between him and Luke Rockhold would be the fight to make. We have Yoel Romero as number 1 and Jacare Souza at number 3, while we have number 4 Kelvin Gastelum fighting for the title. That means that for right now, Yoel versus Souza is a fight that we have to make, and Luke versus Israel Adesanya on the same card. If I was the one that was making these fights, I would say the winner between Luke Rockhold and Israel Adesanya will be the next contender for the title. Shortly after that, I would say the winner of Yoel Romero versus Jacare Souza would get the following title shot. So a win over Anderson Silva doesn't really necessarily mean that Israel Adesanya will get a title shot, but with the star power that Israel has, I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC were to push this fight over a Luke Rockhold fight. And how would Israel Adesanya do against Robert Whittaker or even Kelvin Gastelum? In my mind, it is a very even playing field. Now obviously we have Robert Whittaker, who is a very experienced MMA fighter and a champion of the middleweight division. On the other hand, we have Israel Adesanya, who has been looking sensational, but he isn't as well rounded as Robert Whittaker. Now what evens out this fight is something that Israel Adesanya has over most of his opponents, and that is size. We can't forget that both Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whittaker came from the welterweight division, so the things that may work for Kelvin Gastelum on Robert Whittaker and vice versa will not necessarily mean the same thing on Israel Adesanya, whereas Israel has a lot more size, distance, reach, and also obviously the striking game. Robert and Kelvin don't really have that over one another. It is a pretty even fight. Now for Israel Adesanya to go in there and fight these guys, his chances of beating either of them are bigger because of his size. For example, when DC fought Jon Jones, obviously DC is the better wrestler. Now because of Jon Jones' size, he found it pretty difficult to get in close and work off of his wrestling game, and he got dominated twice by Jon Jones. Now obviously Jon Jones has a way better background in wrestling than Israel Adesanya, but this is just the example that I'm trying to give out. Daniel Cormier wasn't even close enough to initiate a grappling game on Jon Jones. However, Robert Whittaker is a lot more confident on his feet, and I would say that he is a lot better on his feet than Daniel Cormier. This means that he can mix it up better, and maybe Israel Adesanya won't see a lot of these things coming at him. Maybe the weaknesses of Israel Adesanya will be exposed against either of these fighters. More so against Robert Whittaker, I would say, than Kelvin Gastelum, but that is my personal opinion. But in the end, I would say one more fight against Luke Rockhold, another fighter who is aging, would get him a title shot. And after that, I would say that a title victory, winning the belt, isn't that crazy for Israel Adesanya. He has the height, he has the reach, he has the youth, speed, timing, smarts, everything to get the job done. He can pace himself very well, so I don't believe that he's going to get caught up and crumble under the big lights. So it will be very interesting to see how he would do for the title. But for now, this is what if Israel Adesanya defeats Anderson The Spider Silva. What do you guys think? Who do you guys think is going to win? And what do you guys think of Israel Adesanya fighting for the title? Do you guys think he can win the title or not? Leave that all in the comment section down below. As always, I am Keenan from Keenan KTV, signing off. Later.